Good evening, everyone. How you doing tonight? Welcome to the North Carolina Cryptid and Paranormal Project. Hello, everybody in the chat. Welcome. Glad to have you. Tonight we have a guest from the military, ex-military, and he had some things he saw out while being stationed in Texas. He'll be glad to talk about it once I bring him on. But I'm just grateful to have somebody, from the service that did serving us, protecting us on duty. Doing what he did, doing his duty to protect American citizens. So I'm just honored to have somebody come forward and discuss what they saw. So it's an honor and respect to this man who, sacrificed his, everything to keep us, doing what we're doing, So without further ado, here's Mr. Steven.
There we go.
Hey, man.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm doing all right. I appreciate being brought on the show. Whoops, man, I can't do anything right. I appreciate you having me on here. I'm honored. So thank you.
No, it's an honor to have you to come forward to, because not many people, like we discussed in the pre-interview, like, half the population doesn't believe in this stuff. They're too busy, they're too busy on TikTok farting with their phones and doing whatever and, trying to get likes and views and, whatever else they're doing. No one believes, half of them believe in this. They're too worried about, who won the Oscars last week and all that, who's on MTV and whatnot.
Yeah.
And no one's really looking in the woods to see what's going on in the wilderness. That, if they do, they're probably scare the hell out of them. And sadly, you had to endure something like that while you were actually, serving. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that was an interesting and rather terrifying moment, really. So, if you really want me to, I can actually go through the whole scenario.
Start off like with a little bio and then like how you then once you were in the army and then kind of how your encounter started, kind of work into it, if that's cool.
Yeah, that's fine. So I went into the United States Air Force back in 2012, and we were in Lackland Air Force Base is where our boot camp is set. Mm-hmm. So stationed in Lackland, we're going through boot camp, and they have boot camp set up. And if anyone watching this has been through, the Army or the Air Force, Marines, they know about certain weeks through boot camp. They have certain names for them because you're moving closer to becoming, a Marine, an airman, a corpsman, things like that. So for us, we had a week called Beast Week, ironically.
Mm-hmm. Beast Week. Yeah, that's what it was actually called, Beast Week, like Beast.
It's called Beast Week. And what Beast Week was that we were dropped off basically kind of in the middle of nowhere. We had, barracks here and there, but we were basically like in the middle of the woods. Now we had a cross barricade that kind of encircled the encampment, mm-hmm. and around our encampment there was woods. Now I don't know how thick the woods were. We weren't allowed to go in there. We had to stay within this cross fence. So during that week, we basically, were living off of MREs. We were living in tents, but these were not like your typical tent. These were like giant half-cylinder tents that stretched about a good 20 feet by about like maybe 10 feet, 20 feet by 10 feet or more. Right. And it would fit up to about 40 men. So what was going on at this particular moment was that every night, every 2 hours from 8 o'clock at night to about 5 o'clock in the morning, there would be 2 airmen that would be set up to do a night shift. Mm-hmm. So we would have to sit out there in chairs for 2 hours with our M16s in hand, which they were never loaded. These were real M16s, but they were used so that we could take them apart, put them back together again, know the weight and feel of an M16.
Like a simulation almost,
Yes.
but they didn't give you dummy rounds. You didn't get blanks or nothing, right?
No.
Okay.
No, they didn't trust us. But so my shift with another airman, and I can't say his name, we were sitting out there from midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning. That was our shift. So it was probably around maybe 1:30, I would say probably 1:15 at the earliest. And we're just sitting there in these steel chairs, and I look off to the woods. Now, before I continue, where our tent was set was that we were about roughly 80 to about 85 yards away from the woods. So there was our tent, and then there was another tent, and then there was a gap that you could see the woods through.
Okay.
And so, and him and I were actually talking, and I was like, well, dude, have you ever heard of the chupacabra? And he's like, what? I said, yeah, the chupacabra. He's like, what does that mean? I said, well, it's Spanish for goat sucker, and what it is, and I was describing this creature, he's laughing at me, and we were basically just cutting jokes because literally we were the only guys out there, and we were bored, and we were also tired. But at the end of that, talking to him about that, that's when I turned and I looked to the woods.
That's okay. Take your time.
This thing was, there was no silhouette, but I know that this thing was tall, anywhere to about 8 feet. But there were two red eyes staring at us, and they were, like staring at us. They were about this far apart.
Wow. And
they were staring. Now, and before I continue, there's a lot of people that have said, and I've told this to a few people, and what I'm about ready to say is one of the reasons why I didn't really talk much about it is because of the ridicule that I got. Because I've had people come to me and go, oh, well, that was an MTI, a military training instructor. He was out there messing with you. He had red lights and he had them above his head and he's messing with you. And it's like, guys, really? So they made it a big joke. And I'm going to go on ahead and say this. I was a military, or I did help with military instructors for boot camp. During Beast Week, the MTI who was overseeing a flight that went to Beast Week, they didn't go anywhere near the encampment. Right. That was their week off. They got to go be with their family. Yeah, they were able to go and be with their family. They could do their actual job, the one that's not training trainees anymore. They get to be with their family. They get to do their actual job. So they have no hand in that. And then during Beast Week, there's only like 2 MTIs, and they're there. So and the thing is, they're being serious. They have no time for jokes because during that time, they're training us on how to survive on our own. Like how to, during having certain circumstances occur or happen, like over in Iraq, that's what we were training to do. There was no trying to scare the young airmen. Right. That's counterproductive for them.
Right, like it's almost like initiation, but they're not doing it because they don't want to be involved with none of that. They just want to be out and not be around you. So whatever way to avoid, the training crew, that they get the heck out of there and they leave you on your own. And they're like, they don't care because they're doing their thing, and they know that you're safe in the woods doing whatever survival training, whatever they want to send on you.
Yep. Okay. So for me, it wasn't someone holding lights because this did something that only a living being can do, and no person would think about. No one that's trying to pull a prank wouldn't think about doing this. These eyes were blinking. You could tell they were blinking because they would be there and they were gone for a second, like a half second, and then they would be there again. Like, when you blink your eyes, it's a split second. So this thing was standing there staring at us. And now I was staring at it, and I just felt this feeling of dread. Like, I didn't know what to do. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know if this thing would come across the fence, and it's like, well, what am I going to do? All I've got is an M16 that's not even loaded. It's not even technically real. What am I going to do? And this, and again, this was about 80 yards away. So, and it's like something that's about 8 feet tall could clear 80 yards in less than 20 seconds. That's more than enough time for this thing to come over, snap our necks, and drag us away. I mean, anyway. So, and I apologize.
You're okay.
From a cold.
And I also want to say thank you, because we were talking over the weekend, and your voice was very harsh, and you mentioned you had overcoming a cold. So thank you for still coming on, because you could have been like, "Hey Tom, I can't do it," but I appreciate you coming on tonight. I would have rescheduled it for next week, but no worries. Real quick, there was a question from the chat. Did you smell or hear anything?
Well, hear anything? Yes, and I was getting ready to get to that. Smell anything? The only thing that I could smell, and again, from what we understood, there was a creek that was in those woods. It's if you've ever pulled muck from the bottom of a creek.
I know the smell.
Old muck.
I know that smell.
Yeah.
Musky, stenchy, like that nasty, dirty, mucky water that has mud in it and has that funky smell to it. I know exactly what you talk about. It almost smells like if you take a hamburger on a patty, wrap it in tin foil, leave it out in the woods for 2 weeks, come back, and it kind of smells the same way.
Yes.
I've smelt that before on camping trips. But also another question from David Lester. He says, if you can see on the lower section, it says how many saw it and were reports written?
So how many saw it were just the two of us. Everybody, there was nobody else out, which was odd. That was really odd for that time frame. Because we had at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We had about 9 tents. There should have been people out there.
Right.
There wasn't between midnight and 2. And for some oddball reason, there wasn't. And I remember talking with the airmen about it. It's like, where's everybody else at? There should be somebody coming out of those tents. There was nobody. Not even from our brother flight, which that's a whole nother can of worms. Our brother flight was retarded.
Okay.
Anyway.
And no reports were written because there was no report because you kept it to yourself, you and your airman, that you were keeping him, his identity safe, right?
Yes.
No reports were made.
Because, and I have to talk about this just a little bit. I was a medic in the United States Air Force. So, again, I cannot say due to the fact, because I got to see this man's medical records. But he saw it too, just to try to kind of bring back the story a little bit to explain. Yeah. He saw it as well because the thing walked away. We could hear it tearing through the woods, like you could hear just trees,
like a bulldozer, right? Like a bulldozer knocking trees down. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just walked away, and you could see the eyes go like this, and they turned, like they turned and they disappeared, and then you could just hear it like just walking through and knocking a few trees over. That's great. I turned to the guy and I was like, "Did you see?" And I couldn't even get the rest of the words out because he was paler than a sheet.
Wow.
He couldn't speak. I tried to get him to talk. He was silent the whole time. I mean, he didn't want to do anything. He was so shaken by this that he couldn't function anymore.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah. So they had to take him to a medical flight to see if they could try to get him out of it.
Really?
Yes. And unfortunately, they couldn't, and they had to discharge him. They had to get him out because
his mental capability was pretty much gone after that, right?
It was
like
gone.
He couldn't take it anymore, right?
Yeah, because this was the same airman who was laughing and joking about chupacabra and saying, "Nah, they don't exist." And he's like, "Why do you come up with this stuff?" And it's like, "I don't come up with this."
It's all fun and games until you see one, and then your whole life changes. There's another question. You might have mentioned this already, but this is from Brother Nighthawk, and it's a good question. How much of the body could you see if you were able to see anything? Nothing.
Couldn't see a thing. Okay. There was no silhouette
black, right?
because all I could see were like the branches were kind of like intercrossed like this. So this thing was, and that next morning, I had enough time to be able to go to the edge of the cross fence, and the branch that I was looking at was actually 8 feet off the ground, and these eyes were above it.
Right, so you went back and did a recount on, okay.
Yeah, just for a split second, because, again, we had to fall in line, and we were getting ready to move out, but I had enough time during the breakfast part of eating MREs that I took off really quick to take a look. And yeah, the eyes were a little bit above 8 feet off the ground.
Now, did you feel anything like sound wise in your body when this was happening? Because that's someone's question, asking a question about infrasound. Did you feel anything weird like sound waves or anything like that in your body, or hear any voice? Or sometimes the people say these things can communicate telepathically, and you can almost hear them talking to you, through your mind or something. So I wonder if maybe you heard that. No. Okay.
No. I mean, if they're talking about infrasound, I mean, no. All I had was a feeling of dread.
Okay.
And this was, I mean, I've been terrified before. I mean, when I was stationed in Colorado, I came up against a black bear. There was a black bear, and I also came up against a mountain lion. I was scared at those moments, but the feeling that I had with this Bigfoot in Texas was completely different. This was a feeling of, I guess the best way I could explain this is that if you know what a heart attack feels like, people talk about what a heart attack feels like, that it feels like there's an elephant sitting on your chest. That was the feeling that I had, that this feeling of this heavy dread, like, don't mess with me, or I will rip your limbs off. That was the thought that I remember looking at those eyes, was, don't mess with me, I will rip your limbs off.
And that could have very well been like a mind speak that it was telling you, not verbally, but like communication wise for you to feel, because I've heard that before. People get just like a feeling of dread. And it's a lot of times with these red-eyed beings, like there's something like William Brother Nighthawk in the chat said, the red eyes indicate like evil and negative, spirit. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually rather funny that you bring that up. There was a YouTube video that I was watching that, I was listening to this story, and this Bigfoot was actually able to speak to a man who owned this property. And this man said, well, okay, so how do I know that you're not evil? And the Bigfoot basically stated, there's only two kinds of us. You need to beware the red-eyed ones. The red-eyed ones, they are not kind. They are not nice. Yeah. And he's like, but the ones that have blue, they are. Yeah. But it was just fun because I remember talking to Mark about that. And he told me that he's seen them, change color between red, blue, green. And it's like, so there's got to be more than one kind of clan that can produce these lights, where the ones who can only produce red, the red-eyed ones, they're not they're not something to mess with.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. And also, if you follow How to Hunt with Steve Isdall, he grew in the last couple of years. He went from a hunting guide channel to straight up talking about Bigfoot and encounters. And he talks about some people that send him emails. And there's a guy from out west in Arizona near the Four Corners, a native man called the Owl Man. And he talks a lot about the red-eyed ones or the evil ones. And I got another question from Brother Nighthawk, if you got a second. Weather conditions during encounter and the next day.
So it was a clear sky, and I remember because that was the first thing that we were still waking up. It was midnight, and we looked up. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the thing is, it was the clearest sky. It was. I mean, I remember it being so beautiful, and there were stars everywhere. I mean, it was gorgeous. And the next day, it was cloudy.
Really?
Yeah, there was no cloud in the sky that evening, or I should say early that morning. But it was literally the next day when we woke up, there were clouds in the sky.
Wow. That I mean,
And
the
or
weather
broken
patterns.
trees.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm seeing Steve Riley here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking at
You're good. Go
any
ahead.
bent or broken trees. There was a broken tree that I saw, but only one. But again, these woods were dense. So that was probably one of the trees that had snapped. But again, we didn't get much time to just stand around and stare. I mean, we were there to do a job. I mean, we were there to train. We weren't really, off playing around. We really didn't have much time to just sit and do nothing.
Mhm.
So
You weren't thinking Bigfoot investigation, field investigation back then in the Army either. You weren't. That was the last thing on your mind. You were trying to forget it. And then, a couple years later, you start finding out things and hearing encounters and listening to channels and befriending with certain people. And you start finding out the truths and all the connections. And then your head just goes boom.
Yep. I mean, what really set it for me was when I was stationed in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
My commander wanted to run and climb Pikes Peak. And from what I understood, Pikes Peak is an epicenter for a lot of Bigfoot encounters, from what I understood.
Yeah.
Because I visited Old Colorado Springs, which is set in like a canyon. And they have Bigfoot stuff everywhere. So I was like, whoa. And so I was hearing stories from people talking about, they knew some person that had an encounter, with something up on Pikes Peak. So my commander wanted to run Pikes Peak, which they do have trails up there. You can ride up Pikes Peak. So he wanted to do it for physical training one day. So we get up there and we drive halfway up. We get to the trail that he wanted to run. We go running it, and we're all running in a straight line. And I'm looking up ahead of me, and everybody's kind of clustering for a second, and then they keep running. And it's only for a second, and they go. And it's like, what's going on? So it's like, you know what? When I get up there, I'll see what everybody's clustering up for. I get up there, and I'm hearing people, wow, that's a really big bear track. It's like, bear? So I'm like, cool, I want to see a bear track. Get up there, and again, only had a few seconds to look at this. Because again, we're in the middle of physical training. This thing didn't look like a bear track at all. I mean, I've seen black bears. I've interacted with them out there in Colorado. Black bear do have their back feet do have this arc that kind of goes like that in the back part of their foot.
Right.
And it's kind of big. I mean, it's about as big as my foot, a little bit bigger. I mean, if it's a really big black bear, you've got a foot that's about 11, 12 inches. That's a pretty big foot for a black bear. But with any kind of bear, you see claws at the end of the toes.
Yeah.
And their toes are set, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They kind of all stay in the same group. They don't kind of, like our foot, where you see the big toe and then you see the other toes,
Yeah.
come down. This did that. And I'm like, that's a really weird footprint. And I had to keep going. We couldn't stop.
Right.
So that kind of led me to believe it's like, oh, shoot, they're here too. And it kind of unnerved me too, because I was doing a night shift from 5 o'clock all the way up to about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was in the parking lot, and my car is about a mile away, and I have to go running to it to get to my car. And I'm like, it's dark out. There's black bear, there's mountain lion. It's like, and now I'm thinking, oh God, now there's Bigfoot. You know what? I'm booking it to the car.
Exactly.
So it's like, ugh. So,
thank you.
So that was the only 2 times when I was in the service that I interacted with, well, more in Texas than I did in Colorado, but I did hear a whole bunch of stories from people in old Colorado Springs that
it's hot spot big time. But I mean, once you kind of see how like the weather patterns and like the forestry setup is across the country, you kind of know, like you can kind of tell the hot spots, especially like the near water streams or rivers. These things are all over the country. I mean, you just got to get out in the wilderness and do some trekking. I mean, you've seen out in Indiana, you've done some. You've actually went out with Mark Holt, which is the Squatching in Indiana. Which big shout out to Mark Holt for introducing us. Very proud, Mr. he sent me some wedding pictures this weekend. So enjoy your honeymoon, Mark, if you're listening.
You better be.
I'll talk to you in the next week or so, because you're going to be you're in honeymoon phase right now. No one wants to bother you, so enjoy. But I mean, you see these things. He sent me so many pictures of these crazy bends, something like a crazy looking being up in a tree. He went back, and the thing wasn't even in a tree anymore. So whatever was in there tree, and it was weird looking. It looked almost like alienish, kind of.
And he showed me the location. I got to go to that location where he saw that, and he pointed it out. And I got to see how far up off the ground this is. This isn't like, a low-hanging branch. This is high up there. I mean, when I'm looking at the picture, it's like, oh, that doesn't look that high up. I get to where he's pointing it out, and it's like, ooh, wow, that's kind of high.
No normal tree climbing human being is going to go up that high just for the hell of it. No. David Lester wanted to know if you do your own research now, but I know the answer. I don't think anyone else in the chat does.
Yes and no. And what I mean by that is that at the beginning, no, because I didn't want to be thought of as crazy. And once I learned that there's a lot of other people who have seen these things, they say the exact same thing. Right. They don't open up for years because they're terrified of being ridiculed, made fun of, shunned. So I kept a lot of those stories to myself for a while. I mean, when I was dating my wife, I never told her until we were getting closer to being married. And I was like, look, babe, there's some things that I kept from you, and I told her what I've told all of you. And I was like, so what do you think? I mean, if you think I'm crazy, then I'm crazy. She's like, no. And she's like, no, you're not crazy. I think they could be real too. And so she kind of followed me on this Bigfoot journey as well. So.
Yeah. We already got some, Brother Nighthawk wants to have you on his podcast, Midnight Monsters Beyond Dark. So you're already becoming, not popular, but you're already getting your roots in, and you're going to have fun with him too. He does great stuff. You're good. There. Guess who's in the chat?
There he is right there.
Mark Holt.
There you are.
The legendary Mark Holt. Actually, this is the name that Greg Yost, the Squatch Man, gave him. Flute Dude.
Yes, and I got to be there. Just was napping. Yeah.
Napping.
No. Yeah.
And that's awesome. I mean, Marco's out in the woods and he plays his native flute, and he actually plays it for a couple minutes, and he actually has good tunes. He sent me voice text messages through voice on my phone, and I've heard his notes that he plays on the flute, and he actually plays. Uh-oh. My internet, sorry.
Nah, you're good.
But yeah, he goes out in the woods and plays a flute, gets response back from the squatches, and yeah, man, it's crazy stuff. And we definitely need to have once you're done with your honeymoon phase, we need to have you back on and discussing your latest evidence you came out and did, because he's had a lot of crazy stuff happen to him in the last couple months. Because me and him talk a lot, and I hear about recent stuff. So yeah, man.
Well, I had something recent not too long ago, only a few days ago.
Wow.
And I live in an apartment, and I live in an apartment complex.
That's right.
I mean, I don't know if you guys can see this, but you guys can see, there's trees behind me.
Mm-hmm.
Oop! My iPad
That's
fell
okay.
over. I'm having technical difficulties too.
No worries.
But man, this and this wigged me out. This wigged me absolutely out. It was a Saturday. It was a Saturday. I go out with my dog Saturday morning. And he loves going out in the woods. I'm training him to be a squirrel dog.
Right.
So he loves being out in the woods. I take him out there. He uses the bathroom out there, and there's a deer path that I've kind of walked on for the past nearly 4 years that we've been living here. And so it's so worn down. And there's a bend that turns and it goes to the other side of this hill. And there's two trees that sit there, one on one side, one on the other, that kind of mark the turn in the bend. Well, that morning that tree was up. That tree was vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
roots were sticking up on it then?
No. The tree was perfectly fine. Nothing was wrong with this tree.
Okay.
It wasn't upside down. It was just upright, what a tree should be.
Right.
And a friend of ours came from Missouri. She hung out with us. She looks out the window, and this was about, I think, like 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. And she goes, I want to go out in the woods. It's like, that's kind of odd. You want to go out in the woods? You don't take me as someone that wants to be out in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I want to be out in the woods.
Cool.
Before it gets dark. And it's like, all right, cool. So we go out, and my wife meets up with us because she was walking the dog. So it's like, you know what? We're all going in the woods. Let's go. So I take our dog, and my friend and my wife are behind me. I'm leading the way into the woods. And as I go in, I look, the tree's down. The tree is completely down. Yeah, the tree picture that I showed you, just down.
I'm gonna share that if that's okay with you. I'm gonna share.
Go for it.
Quick. I'm gonna This is some. We'll get to the raccoon in a second after this tree.
Mark.
Yeah, Mark. I forgot about that, but yeah, let's get to this tree thing. I'm gonna make it bigger.
Yeah. So that tree was literally, standing up, like what a tree should be doing. But that tree was brought down at the base, base of this tree.
You can see the bottom where the like root structure was pulled out, where it was dislodged from the dirt. Here's another one. Here's the next picture.
Yeah,
you can see I can see the print from my computer, but I don't know if everybody else can. Your next picture is outline print. So this is that. This is the same print, but it's outlined with red, so you can kind of see.
And directly to the left. To the left is the tree.
And how big was that print about?
That print, again, and I put my hand up against that print. My hand is about as big as my foot is long. Mm-hmm. And I've got a size 10.5 foot. Okay. This thing was probably a good maybe 12, like a size 12. Okay. Maybe a size 12.5. So, and again, I don't know if you saw in that other picture where I outlined it, you could see where the big toe was. There was a big toe that left a big imprint right there. So whatever it was that was standing there, stood there first and then put a lot more weight on the toes as it bent because you could see it.
Wow.
But then that next picture where you get a really good zoom of the branch or the tree, that tree was not just broken.
That's cracked.
Broken
snap.
and then twisted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Twisted,
it was broken
almost.
and then twisted.
And you and I, even me and you together grabbing that thing, and maybe two other guys probably couldn't do it. You need some serious blunt force strength to make that snap and twist it like that. I mean, I've seen those kinds of, that kind of formation. Oops, hit the wrong button. Okay.
Yeah, so there's my hand.
There's your hand next to the tree. I'm going to enlarge it real quick, or next to the print. All right, so there's your hand next to the print, which you can kind of see. It's still bigger on both sides. And there's your outline that you did. That's definitely a big foot. Yeah, I mean, it's probably a mediocre, juvenile 18 to 20 maybe, or maybe 14 to 20-year-old possibly.
And that's what Mark was talking to me about. He's like, because we were looking at Fort, which, by the way, Fort Bend is one of the state parks here in Indiana. Fort Bend is literally on my doorstep. Our woods technically connects to Fort Bend. The deer cross from Fort Bend into our little holler that we have back here. And so we were talking, and Mark was like, maybe this could be like a juvenile training ground or something.
Maybe, yeah.
And I was like, maybe. But let me go back a little bit. This tree was snapped. There was, and Mark was asking me, he's like, well, could you have set them in any way? Like, maybe they didn't like your dog pooping out there in the woods. I'm like, well, my dog poops out there in the woods all the time. Mm-hmm. Nothing's ever broken. Nothing's ever disturbed. This was like, and that was disturbed that day, like during daylight hours.
That's crazy. Is that about 25 to 30 feet long, if that, give or take?
It was, I took my measuring tape to it. It was 25 feet.
Wow. And that was my estimate just from looking at it. I said that's got to be at least 25 to 30 feet long.
It's 25 feet. 25 and like 3/4 or something like that. But he was like, so did you do anything to upset them? And I said, well, the night before, there were some kids that were out in the parking lot, and that was around 9 o'clock at night, and they were being loud and obnoxious, and we're trying to sleep. Mm-hmm. So I thought about scaring them. So I grabbed my rabbit in distress call. I go on the back porch behind me, and I just start making a rabbit in distress call. And my wife is watching through the front window. They take off running.
Oh, wow. You scared them from a rabbit call.
Yeah, I scared them with a rabbit call because I didn't do it just like a rabbit. I mean, I was screeching.
Yeah. I know, like I know that sound. Yeah, that's a loud call because I've hunted coyotes with my brother before in New Jersey, and he's had that distressed rabbit call, and it's pretty loud. So when you do that and you're wailing on it, I could just imagine the projection is putting off, and then teenagers that don't know any better because they just they don't know what the hell that is because they're stupid teenagers. They're gonna be shit scared out of them.
And so, and they got quiet for a minute, and I was like, okay, good, it worked. But then we heard them again. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do the pièce de résistance. I'm going to stand out there, and I'm just going to roar, this ungodly roar. And this was the biggest thing I've ever belted out. It probably sounded like a Bigfoot. I kind of did like a cross Bigfoot, whatever. And I told this to Mark, and he's like, ooh, you should really watch that. You have no idea what you're saying.
You might have pissed them off.
I may have, because that was literally the next day. That happened the next day. So, but that actually freaked them out. They went taking off into the apartment over here across the street, and they were all dive-bombing and piling on top of each other.
They probably thought a Bigfoot was coming after them or some big creature in the woods. They didn't know better. But pretty wild.
And the thing is, maybe that probably did upset them because I have done Bigfoot calls into that holler. Thanks to Bobo from Finding Bigfoot. I learned from him how to do it. And well, just by watching them, but I've never had a response or, nothing really happened.
Yeah. Well, the Ohio call,
Oh,
is pretty good. I mean, if you do like the Ohio call that they do, or the Grassman call
yeah,
that Bobo did, that's probably one of the more accurate than stuff that you see like the
yeah,
Moneymaker do. It's just to scream. But Bobo, he's a big guy and he's got a deep set of lungs, so he can belt out
yeah.
a good call. I mean, yeah,
Me and Bobo are built the same.
heck yeah.
But Mark is, and thank you, Mark, for reminding me. So I called Mark. I mean, I was so excited about this. I was like, no way, this just happened about the tree break. I'm like, dude. So I'm trying to call him. My phone dies. I mean, he picks up, my phone dies. It's like, are you kidding? So I try to charge it. I call him again, and he's like, hello. And I said, hey, Mark, hold up before I did. Dies. It's like twice. So I finally get it plugged in. I get out there, and I'm standing right at the tree, and I'm talking to him. And I'm like, Mark, this just happened. And I'm taking pictures. I'm sending it to him. And he's talking to me. And I look over. And again, and I'm going to describe what was going on. It was a windy day.
Mm-hmm.
There were rain clouds getting ready to come in. But it was deathly still. It was deathly still. The wind stopped blowing for a little bit. And I look over, and there is a bush down in the holler that is about 20 feet down.
Okay.
And it's thrashing like this. And then I'm like, holy crap, it's probably went. But then it goes, it doesn't, after a breeze, it does that. And it, slowly does that. And it's just a slow breeze going through it. This shot straight up. Like it was a thrash and it, that.
Wow.
And I'm like, Mark, shut up.
Yeah.
Because like, this just happened.
Wow.
And Mark was telling me, he's like, I think you need to apologize because they're probably upset that you did that last night. I think you need to apologize. So I was apologizing. I was like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about last night.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that you guys didn't like the rabbit call in distress. I hope I didn't offend you. And Mark's like, I forgot what Mark said. He's like, don't forget to say this. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm leaving. I'm backing out. And I turned around and I walked out.
Right.
Oh, no offense. That was it. Mark was like, tell him no offense.
Yeah, no offense.
No offense about, me trying to sound like a Bigfoot to scare these kids off. I was like, I'm just trying to scare these kids off.
Yeah.
No offense. I'm not trying to make fun of you. I just use it as a tactic to get rid of those kids. Mm-hmm. I apologize. I'm leaving.
I mean, you could have been doing them a favor by scaring them off with your call, because maybe if they would have kept at it, they might have gotten chased out or ran off, or maybe bluff charged by the real deal.
Yeah, and
that's what I'm thinking.
We've had coyotes in this holler, and that was the weird thing too. We had a pack of coyotes in this holler, and they were going off every day for a week.
Mm-hmm.
But then, oddly enough, they stop. They just disappear.
Really?
I mean, the coyotes are gone. I mean, they're nowhere to be had. And we've had, kids and other people walking their dogs in the woods at night. And there was a guy out there walking in the woods at night with no flashlight. This is like 11 o'clock at night. And this this was a guy that was walking his dog out in the back of the woods here. And I'm like, and I shine the light because I'm thinking, I'm trying to see if there's any coyotes, because they've come up, they've heard my dog. And so they come up to see about it. And I flashed and I saw this guy's eye shine and his dog's eye shine. I was like, hey, buddy, you got to get out of there. There's a pack of coyotes down there. What? It's like, there's coyotes down there. I would think you want to be out of there, bud.
No, you don't want to be around coyotes.
But that was about like a few months ago, and then it goes silent. And we used to have a bunch of deer back here too. They actually stopped.
I was just going to ask you, has the deer population dwindled down?
A little bit it has. Yeah. Because when we first moved here, at first we didn't see any at all. Because I was thinking, we're in the city. This is the city. We're in Marion County, which is the heart of Indiana. It's where
Mm-hmm.
Indianapolis resides. So it's
Right.
like, I'm not going to see much deer here. Well, then we started seeing deer all over the place. I mean, we've had like a herd of 5 doe. We've had a buck that had 12 points on his head. I named him Megatron because he was just so freaking huge. We had a really good 8-point buck that showed up. I mean, we had deer all the time pass through there. Well, as the years have gone on that we've been here, we're nearly pushing 4 years now that we've lived here.
I know the feeling because I live in Charlotte, and Charlotte's like the city hub of North Carolina, like one of the main city hubs. And I actually live in like the suburb area on the outskirts of the city. And we moved out here in 2015, and I noticed a crap load of deer on my property. And I even started hunting a deer, and I had an encounter while hunting a couple of years back. But that being said, I've noticed the deer population has dwindled down a little bit. I don't know if it's because maybe they did animal control when they had that rabid deer zombie disease where a lot of the deer meat was really bad and it was infected with some kind of virus. I heard they did a lot of extermination of that's the wildlife naturally by parks and wildlife and game wardens and that kind of thing, and dwindling down the population to get it back to normal. But I don't know if that has anything to do with my area. But let's get to the raccoon story because Mark's going crazy about this.
Yeah. Yes. So, I told Mark that, we live right next to Fort Bend. We literally can walk into it. That's how close we are.
Okay.
And he's like, okay. And I said, well, my wife and I are wanting to try to go, mushroom hunting in there too. So we're going to be scouting as well. So we get down in there and Mark's already doing an investigation. I mean, he's blinders and everything, he's looking, and we find a pile of it's a deer bones, a pile of them right off the main trail that leads into the park, like just right there, and you can't really see it. I mean, if you're not looking for it, you can't see it. But when we got there, I mean, it's a pile,
right?
And these were picked clean, and they were put in a pile. Me being a hunter, and I've been out, like I said, on my in-laws' property. I have a deer skull that I got from a dead body, from a dead deer, but its bones were laying how it fell.
Right.
This wasn't put in a pile, like it was being chewed on and then put into a pile. Which, by the way, some of those bones looked like they had teeth marks. Not from a canine. Yeah, not from canine. Yeah. So, but then there's a grove of walnut trees that were planted by the DNR.
Right.
And one of these trees, which, by the way, these trees are like this big around. One of them snapped, and it was not like that the last time we were there. Before we got there with Mark, that tree was not like that. Pardon me. And you could see, I mean, I was the one who pointed it out because I was looking, I'm like, something grabbed this tree. And there was no tire marks, there was no, power equipment, tires, nothing. This tree was just brought down, and it's like, if this was a windstorm, there would have been like probably 5 or 6 more of these trees brought down almost in the same direction.
Right.
No, this was the only single solitary tree, and it was brought down. And as I'm looking at it, I'm looking to the side, and there's part of the bark that's ripped off, and you can see where there was like claw marks, like something grabbed it.
Really?
Like, yeah. And it was like, whoa. So we decide, and me and my wife and Mark are out there, and we're walking. We're trying to see if anything else is out there. We think we saw like a few footprints here and there. But then my wife points out something, and she gets Mark to go over there, and she's like, well, could this be something? And and I look down, and there's a raccoon, or there's this lump of flesh.
Right.
And I'm like, what is this? And I'm looking, it's like, this was turned inside out.
Yeah, Mark said it was like reminded him of Predator
Yeah,
when
like
they
this.
took the skull and ripped it out of the body, and all that was left was flesh.
Yeah, and how this was that the skull was there,
Mhm.
and the paws were still there, all four paws. And I'm like, I didn't know what it was at first. Mark was the one who said, well, this looks like a raccoon. And I started looking at it. It's like, well, yeah, the fur matches, everything matches. It's a
Right.
raccoon. But I started looking at it. It's like, Mark, something's missing. I was like, Mark, where's the spine?
Yeah,
The
where's spine?
skull's here. The hips are here. The
Hmm.
shoulder blades are there. The skin is not cut by a knife
Hmm.
because again, I've had to cut open animals,
Right.
several times, and you can tell from a good clean cut
Yep.
to something that's
Ripped,
ripped.
ripped and torn. Yep.
This thing was ripped, and the skin was pulled, and you could see the hands, the skin was pulled
Oh
like
wow.
like a glove, just pulled like that, and you could still see the fingers. And
Whatever it was, it had some really good force, some really strong, blunt force to handle that, and almost like like a psi. Well, they say like 1,300 psi to pull something apart. That's what you got to think of. That much force.
and so I asked around. I know some guys who are coon hunters
Hmm.
because it's like and Mark was like, well, could it be like someone was hunting a coon and just left us here? I'm like, well, first of all, they would have taken the skin, they would have taken the hide
Yeah, you get
because
money for the hide. Yep.
fur bears, people
Yep.
who fur bear do the fur bear hunting, they're after the hide, they're after
Yep.
the skin, and so they wouldn't leave that behind. That wouldn't be left behind at all.
No, that's considered a pelt. You get like $20 a pelt now. I don't know that at one time it was like 20 $25 a pelt, and they use it for like to make the Crockett hats or fur coats or whatever they do with them, and you
Yeah,
get money per pelt. So as many pelts as you get, you can cash in, and that's why there's a lot of fur trappers, especially out west.
yeah. And so it's like, no, this couldn't have been a hunter because the whole skin was left there. And
Hmm.
again, this thing was turned inside out. Like inside out. Like it folded on itself. The
Hmm.
head was here, its back end was here, and it like someone was trying to break open a banana. That's how
Oh yeah.
I would compare this to, is that it's just busted like someone broke open a banana and then
Hmm.
ripped the spine out of it. And it's like, and I started looking at Mark. It's like, well, where's the most nutrients at in the body, in any animal's body? Where is it located? It's here.
Spleen. Yep.
And the spine has marrow, all bone has marrow. Well, the most nutrients is actually in the spine. Oh, yeah, Mark said back in the day, here at least, it was $40 a pelt for a coon. So why would you leave money, $40 worth, at,
Hmm.
just laying there?
Karen. That was Karen said walking raccoon taco. I was like, yeah,
Right.
right, Karen. Exactly.
Yeah. So that left me a little unnerved. Was that it's like, and again, how the skin was ripped apart and then dragged down,
Hmm.
like it was like degloving this animal, but
Exactly.
left it that
Degloving.
way.
Yep. Degloving. Um, I know there's a technique that sometimes the taxidermy people use where they actually like when they do like deer, they kind of cut along the edges of the membrane between the skin and the
Yep.
muscle, and they use an air gun and it blows it
Yep.
off. And that's what I was thinking of when Mark was telling me the story. I was thinking of like that's the kind of pressure you need to get that skin off. Like you need that really high compressed air to
Yeah.
and to
It's
pull it and squeeze
also
it off.
with squirrels. When you
Yep.
want
Squirrels.
to you actually rip the hide off. I mean,
Mhm.
you kind of like rip it off like it's a suit. Like you're ripping off the fur and the hide like it's a suit off of the squirrel so that you can get to the meat. That's what this looked like.
Wow.
But this was man, I was standing there like, ooh, I found some good.
Mm. Blood? Was there any blood? You remember blood?
No,
Being Okay, no blood.
no, there was no blood present.
Wow.
It
I
was a
think Mark
total.
mentioned that. Yep.
Yeah, there was no blood present. There was none. this and from what I would gather, just looking at it, again, seeing out on my in-laws' property, I've come across plenty of coyote kills that I have been able to closely guesstimate the time of death just by the smell. This had a rather ripe smell. This probably was this way for about a week to a week and a half.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty odd for something to sit that much in the woods when there's scavengers to eat it sitting for a week. So it's almost like they didn't want it. They saw it, they smelt it, and they wanted nothing to do with it because of what they saw.
Right. And and what I've learned about coyotes anyway is that, yeah, they're rather particular. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, they'll take things and they'll run off with them. Mm-hmm. But if it's something they don't want or they feel that their life is in danger, they won't touch it. Absolutely. I mean, I've put out bait out there to try to go coyote hunting myself. And, you know, my scent was on it. I forgot to descent it because that was the first time I was actually coyote hunting. And mm-hmm. I was able to get a hold of a squirrel, and I gutted it a little bit, and I put it out there to try to bait this coyote to come in because they've been eating my deer. It came over. It sniffed it because I put a whole bunch of descenting stuff on me, but I didn't do it to that coon or to that squirrel. It smelled the squirrel, and instead of taking it, it ran off.
Dang.
It knew something was wrong, and it took off before I could even get a good headshot. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense that probably Bigfoot or the Sasquatch had this. Its scent is still on it. Mm-hmm. And the predators, the coyotes and whatnot, they're like, no, I don't want to touch this. There's something off about this.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. I want to share your pictures real quick before we close because we're almost at an hour. So I want to real quick go through because you also did some artist work, and let's get to it, man. That's pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, these are. I made like a field guide. And this was several years back, and this was when I was really wanting to get into like cryptozoology, mm-hmm. like wanting to take, courses so that I can be certified in cryptozoology. So I took, and everything that's written there is from what I knew from mm-hmm. other people's, from what other people have told me to,
right.
Even me just looking up these stories and reading about them. So this is what I put down as the North American Bigfoot because I know that there's other kinds that are throughout the world.
That's pretty good descriptive of your depiction of because that's a lot like the really large traps. The head kind of forms into the shoulders, what they call no necks down in the South. The wide shoulders, if you could tell, the arms reach down past the knees, but it doesn't really have long legs. The legs aren't as long as the arms, which is really cool. I mean, that's pretty spot on. The wide, they say like the mouth it's always like a wide mouth. Yeah. Like people say like when they see them open their mouths, a lot of descriptions say they can fit a grapefruit in their mouth, and that's pretty damn big.
That's big
because that's how that's what they see. I mean, it's crazy. A massive beast, and you gave him some hair on the sides of his arms. I mean, that's pretty. The foot, the knee. I mean, everything is descriptive. Pretty barrel chested. I mean, he's a stout bastard. Pretty much.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go up against him in a wrestling match.
You wouldn't want to get up. He didn't see this. This is the art description, Lori, and here's another one. This is the Jersey Devil. This is pretty badass because I'm from New Jersey, so I've been hearing about the Jersey Devil since I was pretty much 5 years old.
My uncle lives in New Jersey and lives pretty close to where the Pine Barrens are, and he was telling me about the Jersey Devil, so I was listening to him, and I got really interested in it, and the antlers are actually from a set of antlers that I found out in the woods, so the antlers that you're looking at are actually based off of real antlers.
Now this drawing this kind of reminds me of almost like a goat man. When people see a goat man with wings, that's what my take. But I mean, I can't say. And this is your artwork. This is what your illustration was. What what you were thinking. It's really good. But when I see it, it reminds me a lot of like the goat man description people see with horns. Wow. Yep. There's Goat Man. So you made your own Goat Man?
Yeah.
Damn, that's freaking awesome. And here's Loch Ness. There's Loch Ness. Once we get off Loch Ness, I'll take the share screen off, and you could show the Goat Man one more time before we close, because
Yeah.
that's pretty damn awesome. And the Loch Ness, I mean, that's crazy. And there's also Lake Champlain. They call him
Yep.
Champy.
Oh yeah.
My
I
good
drew that
friend,
too.
my good friend Kenny Irish did a whole description on that. We interviewed him. Okay, so I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna stop sharing this. Okay, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna enlarge the screen. I'm gonna make it bigger now so you can. All right, go ahead. Show your picture now. That is freaking awesome. Yeah. Wow.
Yep. I mean, I've also got. I mean, just to end this out,
Yeah.
here's the Honey Island or the Honey Island Swamp Monster.
Damn. Ogopogo.
Uh, oh yeah, I've got Ogopogo here. I've got the. Well, yeah.
That's a beast right there. The Yeti. I was gonna say it looks like the description of a Yeti. The bigger size in the
Yep.
Siberian mountains or just out in the Himalayan area. And a lot of people think the Yetis are all white, but that's just
No,
take
that's a
on
myth.
illustration. These things are dark
that's
brown
TV.
almost. I mean, there is probably some albino ones, but like they said, the majority of these things are dark hair color, and they're not white. That's just what society pointing them as, because it's a Yeti.
Yeah, because it was TV.
Himalayas, the mountains in the snow, it's going to be white. But that's just the albino.
And this is the last one that I'll show.
Yeah.
This one is the one that I guess is the closest, I should say, to what I kind of saw out there in the woods. This is the Mothman.
Okay.
But
yeah. Wow. No, it looks like a good Mothman depiction. Yeah, that's really
so.
really,
But if you look at those red eyes, that's about close to what. That's all I could really see when I was out in the woods in Texas.
Damn. Yeah, you got people in the chat saying they'd buy your book if you had it published right now. They'd buy your book just from the illustrations. I'd buy a copy. Hell yeah.
Well, what I'm going to be doing is that since now I have a better grasp on digital art, again, this was made years ago.
Yeah.
I wish I could show
Dogman, Wendigo, and a Skinwalker. You need to get them on drawing. That would be top it off, because I mean, Dogman is the popular thing right now. I mean, people are seeing these upright walking canines like crazy across the country, and it's only a matter of time before they're kind of I don't think everything will get disclosed. There might be a little bit of disclosure from the government, but I just don't think it's going to be really big. I mean, look how long it took UFOs to get disclosed, and they're still kind of denying it, saying it's it's this, it's that, it's whatever.
And I think I might have seen one too.
Yeah,
actually,
probably
not too long ago.
A lot of military. Were you in the military at that time or no?
No, This was like about a few months ago.
Okay.
But I know that you need to try to close out your show. I don't want to take up much time.
No,
I remember.
You're good. I could spare like 3 minutes and then we'll close it. So if you want to just go real quick.
So this is really quick. My wife and I were at my mom and dad's house. We were in their backyard. We were enjoying, the fire pit. And I look up, and I can see a helicopter fly off, and it's red flashing light and a blue flashing light. But there was a white ball of light, very small, looked like a planet. And it was just slowly going up. And I was like, babe, is that a helicopter? She's looking at it. It could be. I don't know. And it's like, but, this helicopter isn't zooming off really quick. Mm-hmm. It's just there. And it's like, this thing is just still climbing up. It's just going up. It's not going like to the left or to the right. It's just going up. And then gone. And this wasn't like a drone or anything. This looked like, when you see like the planets in the sky, they're a brighter dot up in the sky than all the other stars. That's how this looked. But it just kept slowly climbing up, and then it disappeared. It was just gone.
That's pretty amazing. I've seen some stuff. Steven, this is the brother Nighthawk. He would like to get you information. What I'll do is I'll take your information and send it over to him. He'll look you up on Facebook, and go. And I can also give you his email too. I think it's the codaman33 at Gmail, but I'll send it over to you
Yeah.
later on. But yeah, I do really honored to have you on tonight. It was really good. I'm glad you were able to come on. And this is your first interview ever, right? You've never done this
Yes,
before. Okay.
I have never done this before. This is a first.
Wow, that's pretty
So,
awesome. That you did it, and I got the honor of having you on. So I'm sure you're going to be around here and there. I'll be seeing you around. We talk a lot still. Don't be a stranger. I'll invite
oh
you to
yeah.
one of my groups on Facebook
Hmm.
and some other groups if you're interested. And we're going to have some fun together. And definitely looking forward to getting with Mark soon too, because he wants to
Oh yeah.
come down. Mark actually wants to come to the Carolinas and do some investigating with me, and I'll gladly have him come out and show him the areas that I've been to and do some investigation, because I'm dying for it with this new weather that we're having. I mean, it
Oh yeah.
seems like every freaking weekend it rains in Charlotte, and that's all we get is rain. And the only days off I have are weekends, so I can't do shit until it's not raining. So that being
Yeah.
said,
Well, if
I
Mark's going to be
appreciate it.
going, I might just go too. Shoot.
Yeah, man. Come one, come all. There's room in Charlotte. Y'all might have to like shack up in a hotel or camp in the backyard, but you could stay. Whatever you want.
All righty.
Well, I will. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, everybody
Yep.
in the chat. Thank you, Mark, and thank you,
Thank you
Steven,
guys.
for sharing your encounters. Have a great night, everybody.
You guys too.
Okay, bye. Everybody, y'all have a great night. Thank you, and God bless. Thank you for coming on tonight, and y'all